Steven Spielberg stands as one of the most remarkable storytellers of our lifetime. A man who took childhood dreams and turned them into films that have touched billions of hearts across the globe. His journey is not just about making movies, it's about understanding the human spirit, capturing our deepest fears and highest hopes, and reminding us that magic still exists in this world. Born on December 18, 1946 in Cincinnati, Ohio, Steven Allen Spielberg came into a world still healing from the wounds of World War II. His father, Arnold, was an electrical engineer who worked with computers when they were still room-sized machines that few people understood. His mother, Leah, was a concert pianist who filled their home with music and creativity. From his father, Steven inherited a love of technology and precision. From his mother, he gained an artistic soul and the courage to dream big. The Spielberg family moved often because of Arnold's work, from Cincinnati to New Jersey, then to Phoenix, Arizona, and finally to California. For young Steven, these moves were difficult. He was always the new kid at school, always trying to fit in, never quite succeeding. He was smaller than the other boys, skinny and awkward, with thick glasses that made him an easy target for bullies. Being Jewish in predominantly Christian neighborhoods during the 1950s and 60s added another layer of isolation. Other children called him names, excluded him from games, made him feel like he didn't belong. But children who feel like outsiders often develop the richest inner lives. Steven discovered that he could escape into worlds of his own making. When he was 12 years old, his father brought home an 8mm camera, and everything changed. Steven borrowed that camera and made his first film a simple Western using his toy trains. He staged a train crash, filmed it from multiple angles, and in that moment, he found his calling. Through the camera lens, he could control everything. He could create entire universes. He could be powerful in a way he never felt in real life. His parents noticed his passion and encouraged it, even as their own marriage struggled. By age 13, Steven had made a 40-minute war film called Escape to Nowhere that won a prize in a local competition. At 16, he wrote and directed a 2-hour science fiction film called Firelight about scientists investigating mysterious lights in the sky. It cost $500 to make money he raised from various sources, and it actually played at a local movie theater in Phoenix, earning back its budget plus a small profit. Imagine that, a 16-year-old boy in 1963, already thinking and working like a professional filmmaker. But life wasn't a smooth path to success. After high school, Steven applied to the prestigious film schools at the University of Southern California and the University of California at Los Angeles. Both schools rejected him. His grades weren't good enough, they said. This rejection stung, but Spielberg had already learned that when one door closes, you find a window. He enrolled at California State University, Long Beach, to study English, but his real education happened elsewhere. Young Steven began visiting Universal Studios in Los Angeles. Sometimes he'd sneak onto the lot by jumping off the tour bus and hiding until the tourists left. Sometimes he'd wear a suit, carry his father's briefcase, and walk past the security guard as if he worked there. He found an abandoned janitor's closet and turned it into his own office. For months, he wandered the studio lot, watching professionals work, introducing himself to anyone who would talk to him, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. This boldness, this refusal to accept no for an answer, defined Spielberg's early years. In 1968, at age 21, he made a 24-minute short film called Amblin about two hitchhikers traveling across the American desert. The film had barely any dialogue, but told its story through images and emotion. Sidney Sheinberg, the vice president of Universal Television, saw the film and was so impressed that he offered Spielberg a 7-year contract with Universal. Steven became the youngest director ever signed to a long-term deal with a major Hollywood studio. His television work throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s showed remarkable maturity and skill. He directed episodes of popular shows like Marcus Welby M. D, The Name of the Game, and Columbo. Each assignment was a chance to learn, to experiment, to get better. Then in 1971, he was given the chance to direct a television movie called Duel. Duel told a simple but terrifying story: a businessman driving through the California desert is chased and terrorized by a massive truck whose driver we never see. With minimal dialogue and maximum suspense, Spielberg turned this simple premise into a masterwork of tension. Every shot built anxiety. Every decision the protagonist made felt real and desperate. The film was so good that it was released in European movie theaters and won critical acclaim. At 24 years old, Steven Spielberg had announced himself as a major talent. His first theatrical feature film, The Sugarland Express in 1974, was a road movie based on a true story about a couple trying to recover their baby from foster care. It was well-reviewed and showed Spielberg's growing confidence with composition, camera movement, and storytelling. But it was his second theatrical film that would change everything. Jaws, released in the summer of 1975, was supposed to be a straightforward thriller about a killer shark terrorizing a beach resort. Based on Peter Benchley's best-selling novel, it should have been relatively simple to make. Instead, it became one of the most difficult productions in Hollywood history. The mechanical sharks, they had three, all nicknamed Bruce, constantly malfunctioned in the saltwater. The ocean shooting was unpredictable. Weather delayed filming. Costs spiraled out of control. The studio grew increasingly worried about this 27-year-old director who seemed to be losing control of his movie. But Spielberg turned disaster into triumph. Because the shark didn't work, he couldn't show it as much as he'd originally planned. This limitation forced him to be creative. He suggested the shark's presence through point-of-view shots from beneath the water. He used floating barrels to show where the shark was without showing the shark itself. He relied on John Williams' brilliant two-note musical theme, those ominous notes that start slowly and build to a frenzy to create fear in the audience's imagination. The result was terrifying. Jaws didn't just succeed, it became a cultural phenomenon. It created the modern concept of the summer blockbuster. People lined up around the block to see it. They talked about it constantly. Many people genuinely became afraid to go swimming in the ocean. The film grossed over $470 million worldwide and became the highest-grossing film of all time, until Star Wars surpassed it 2 years later. At 27, Steven Spielberg had become one of the most powerful directors in Hollywood. After Jaws, Spielberg could have played it safe, making one shark movie after another. Instead, he chose to follow his heart. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In 1977 was his personal vision of what contact with alien life might be like. Unlike most science fiction films where aliens came to conquer or destroy, Spielberg imagined first contact as a spiritual, almost religious experience, beautiful and transcendent rather than terrifying. The film's protagonist, played by Richard Dreyfuss, becomes obsessed with visions of a mountain after a close encounter with a UFO. He can't explain why, but he knows he must reach this place. The film builds slowly, carefully, showing how this obsession affects his family and his life. The final sequence, where humans and aliens meet at Devil's Tower in Wyoming and communicate through music and colored lights, remains one of the most awe-inspiring scenes in cinema history. What made Close Encounters special was its sense of wonder. In the 1970s, when cinema was becoming increasingly dark and cynical, Spielberg dared to be optimistic. He suggested that the universe might be full of beauty and mystery, that the unknown might be something to embrace rather than fear. This hopefulness, this fundamental belief in goodness, would become a hallmark of his work. Not everything succeeded. 1941, released in 1979, was an expensive comedy about paranoia in California after the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was chaotic, overlong, and not particularly funny. It was Spielberg's first significant failure, and it taught him an important lesson: bigger and louder don't always mean better. Sometimes the quieter, more personal stories resonate most deeply. In 1981, Spielberg collaborated with his friend George Lucas to create Raiders of the Lost Ark. They wanted to make a modern version of the adventure serials they'd loved as children, those old Saturday matinee cliffhangers, where heroes faced impossible odds and always escaped at the last second. They created Indiana Jones, an archaeology professor who moonlights as an adventurer, searching for biblical artifacts and fighting Nazis. Harrison Ford brought Indiana Jones to life with perfect charm, tough but vulnerable, intelligent but prone to getting in over his head, heroic but believably human. The film opened with one of cinema's most famous sequences, Indiana Jones stealing a golden idol from a booby-trapped temple, then running from a giant boulder rolling down a corridor behind him. From that first scene, audiences were hooked. Raiders of the Lost Ark was pure entertainment, thrilling action, romantic chemistry, humor, and spectacular adventure. It felt both nostalgic and fresh, reminding older audiences of the movies they'd loved as children. While introducing younger audiences to that style of storytelling, the film was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and made Indiana Jones one of the most beloved characters in cinema history. Then came E.T., the Extraterrestrial in 1982, perhaps the most personal film Spielberg had made to that point. The story of a lonely boy who befriends an alien stranded on Earth came from Spielberg's own childhood feelings of isolation. After his parents divorced when he was young, Steven had felt abandoned and alone in E.T. He created the friend he'd wished for, someone who understood, who made the loneliness bearable, who made you feel special. Elliot, the young protagonist played by Henry Thomas, finds E.T. hiding in his backyard and brings him inside. The two form a deep bond that transcends language. When E.T. falls ill from being away from his home planet, Elliot feels his pain literally, as they've formed some kind of psychic connection. When government scientists take E.T. away and he appears to die, children and adults alike wept in movie theaters around the world. But E.T. revives, and in the film's emotional climax, he must return home. The goodbye scene between Elliot and E.T. is genuinely heartbreaking. "I'll be right here," says, touching Elliot's forehead, promising that their connection will endure even across the stars. The image of Elliot and E.T. flying across the moon on a bicycle became one of the most iconic images in film history, a symbol of childhood wonder and the power of friendship. E.T. touched something profound in audiences. It reminded adults of the intensity of childhood emotions, how friendships feel like life and death matters, how saying goodbye can break your heart. It showed children that it was okay to be different, okay to feel lonely, because connection and understanding could come from the most unexpected places. The film became the highest-grossing movie of all time, holding that record for over a decade, and established Spielberg not just as a master of spectacle, but as someone who could reach deep into the human heart. Throughout the 1980s, Spielberg continued to push himself in new directions. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in 1984 was darker than Raiders, perhaps too dark for some audiences. On that film's set in Sri Lanka, Spielberg met actress Kate Capshaw, who played Willie Scott. They fell in love and married in 1991. Their marriage has lasted over 3 decades, a true Hollywood success story in an industry where marriages often fail. The Color Purple in 1985 marked a major turning point in Spielberg's career. Based on Alice Walker's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, it told the story of Celie, a black woman in the early 20th century American South, who endures poverty, abuse, and separation from her sister, but who ultimately finds her voice, her strength, and her freedom. It was Spielberg's first serious drama, and many people doubted whether the director of E.T. and Raiders could handle such difficult, painful material. He proved them wrong. The Color Purple was emotionally powerful and beautifully crafted. It introduced Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey in their film debuts, both giving performances that earned Academy Award nominations. The film itself received 11 Oscar nominations, though controversially, Spielberg was not nominated for Best Director. Many saw this as a snub from an Academy that didn't take him seriously as an artist, viewing him only as a maker of popular entertainment. But the film demonstrated that Spielberg had depths beyond blockbusters. He could tell intimate human stories about pain, resilience, and hope. He could handle complex themes of race, gender, and power. He was growing as an artist, no longer content to be seen as just the blockbuster guy. Empire of the Sun in 1987, based on J.G. Ballard's semi-autobiographical novel, told the story of a British boy, separated from his parents in Shanghai during World War II and imprisoned in a Japanese internment camp. The film explored how war destroys innocence, how children adapt to unimaginable circumstances, how survival sometimes means losing parts of yourself. It was visually stunning. Spielberg's camera work had never been more sophisticated and emotionally complex. By the late 1980s, Spielberg was at a crossroads. He'd made immensely successful entertainment films and increasingly ambitious dramatic films. He'd made more money than he could ever spend. He had a beautiful family, Kate, and eventually 7 children, both biological and adopted. What more could he accomplish? What stories still needed telling? The answer came in the early 1990s when he decided to make 2 films that would define his legacy. The first was Jurassic Park, based on Michael Crichton's novel about a theme park filled with cloned dinosaurs. The second was Schindler's List, about Oskar Schindler, the German industrialist who saved over 1,000 Jewish lives during the Holocaust. Jurassic Park, released in June 1993, revolutionized visual effects. Working with industrial light and magic, Spielberg created dinosaurs that looked absolutely real. The combination of animatronic models and computer-generated imagery produced creatures that moved, breathed, and felt alive. The T-Rex attack scene with its ground-shaking footsteps, the water rippling in the glass, and those massive jaws terrified and thrilled audiences. The velociraptor stalking children through a kitchen created unbearable suspense. But beyond the spectacle, Jurassic Park asked important questions. Just because we can do something, should we? What are our responsibilities when we play with the fundamental building blocks of life? The film became one of the highest-grossing movies ever and spawned a massive franchise that continues today. While Jurassic Park dominated summer theaters, Spielberg was already working on Schindler's List, a project he'd been developing for over a decade. The film told the true story of Oskar Schindler, a Nazi Party member and profiteer who initially employed Jewish workers in his factory because they were cheap labor, but who gradually came to see them as human beings and risked everything to save them from the death camps. Filming Schindler's List in black and white in Poland, often at actual Holocaust sites, was emotionally devastating. Spielberg had put off making the film for years because he didn't feel mature enough, skilled enough, or emotionally prepared enough. Now, as a husband and father, as someone approaching 50 years old, he felt the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just another movie, it was testimony, memorial, and mourning all at once. The film didn't flinch from showing the horror of the Holocaust. The liquidation of the Krakow ghetto is almost unbearable to watch. The casual brutality, the senseless murder, the chaos and terror. One little girl in a red coat, the only color in the black and white film, wanders through the nightmare. And when Schindler sees her body later on, a cart of corpses, something in him breaks. He realizes that every single person being murdered has a name, a story, a life that matters. The film's most powerful scene comes near the end. The war is over, Schindler's workers are free, and they present him with a ring made from gold fillings, inscribed with a Talmudic saying, "Whoever saves one life saves the world entire." Schindler breaks down, sobbing that he could have saved more. He could have sold his car, his Nazi pin, everything he owned. "I could have gotten one more person," he cries. It's a reminder that in the face of evil, indifference is complicity. Every life matters. Every choice matters. Schindler's List was released in December 1993. It was difficult to watch but impossible to forget. Critics called it a masterpiece. Audiences left theaters in silence, emotionally drained. At the Academy Awards, it won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. After decades of making beloved films, after creating some of the most successful movies in history, Steven Spielberg finally received the recognition from the film industry that he'd always deserved. But the film meant more to him than awards. It reconnected him with his Jewish heritage and identity. It made him realize that he had a responsibility to use his platform for education and remembrance. He donated his profits from the film to charity and established the Survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation, which has recorded over 50,000 video testimonies from Holocaust survivors, creating an irreplaceable archive for future generations. Throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, Spielberg continued to balance popular entertainment with serious drama. Aladdin: Lost World, Jurassic Park in 1997 brought back the dinosaurs. Saving Private Ryan in 1998 depicted World War II with unprecedented realism. The opening D-Day sequence, 25 minutes of chaotic, brutal combat on Omaha Beach, was so realistic that some veterans had to leave theaters, overwhelmed by memories. The film followed a squad of soldiers sent to find and bring home Private James Ryan, whose 3 brothers have all been killed in action. It asked profound questions about sacrifice, duty, and the value of a single life. Tom Hanks gave one of his finest performances as Captain Miller, a school teacher turned soldier who just wants to survive and get home. The film won 5 Academy Awards and became one of the most respected war films ever made. AI. Artificial Intelligence in 2001 was Spielberg's tribute to Stanley Kubrick, who had developed the project before his death. It told the story of a robot boy programmed to love, exploring what it means to be human, to feel, to long for connection. Minority Report in 2002 was a futuristic thriller about free will and predestination. Catch Me If You Can in 2002 was a lighter, more playful film about con artist Frank Abagnale Jr., featuring wonderful performances by Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. Munich in 2005 examined the aftermath of the terrorist attack at the 1972 Olympics, following the Mossad team assigned to assassinate those responsible. It was a morally complex film that refused easy answers, asking whether revenge brings justice or just perpetuates cycles of violence. Some people criticize Spielberg for showing empathy toward all sides of the conflict, but that empathy, that insistence on seeing the humanity in everyone, has always been central to his worldview. In 2012, he made Lincoln, focusing on the last months of Abraham Lincoln's life as he fought to pass the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. Daniel Day-Lewis gave an extraordinary performance as Lincoln, wise, weary, haunted by the war's casualties, but determined to finish what he'd started. The film showed politics as the art of persuasion, compromise, and persistence. In our current era of political division, it reminded audiences that great change requires both idealism and pragmatism. Bridge of Spies in 2015 told the true story of James Donovan, an insurance lawyer asked to negotiate a prisoner exchange during the Cold War. Tom Hanks played Donovan as a fundamentally decent man who insists on following the rules even when everyone says the rules don't apply. The film argued that principles matter most when they're hardest to uphold, that we prove who we are by how we treat our enemies. The Post in 2017 depicted the Washington Post's decision to publish the Pentagon Papers, classified documents revealing government lies about the Vietnam War. With Meryl Streep as publisher, Katharine Graham, and Tom Hanks as editor Ben Bradley, the film celebrated journalism's role in holding power accountable. In an age of attacks on the press and questions about truth itself, the film felt urgently relevant. More recently, West Side Story in 2021 was Spielberg's first musical, a reimagining of the classic tale of Romeo and Juliet set among rival gangs in 1957 New York. Even in his 70s, Spielberg continued to challenge himself, exploring new genres and finding fresh ways to tell timeless stories about love, prejudice, and the possibility of transcendence. The Fabelmans in 2022 was his most personal film, a semi-autobiographical story about a young filmmaker growing up in a fractured family, discovering both his calling and painful truths through the lens of a camera. It was as if, after decades of telling other people's stories, Spielberg finally felt ready to tell his own. Over the course of more than 50 years, Steven Spielberg has directed or produced over 100 films. He's won 3 Academy Awards and been nominated for 19 more. His films have grossed over $10 billion worldwide. He's created iconic characters like Indiana Jones and E.T. and unforgettable images like the T-Rex attacking the Jeep in Jurassic Park or the little girl in the red coat in Schindler's List. But statistics don't capture what makes Spielberg special. What makes him unique is his ability to tell stories that resonate across generations and cultures. His films speak to something universal in the human experience, our capacity for wonder, our need for connection, our ability to find hope even in darkness. He's shown us dinosaurs and aliens, heroes and villains, the heights of human courage and the depths of human cruelty. He's made us laugh, scream, cry, and cheer. He's reminded us that movies aren't just entertainment, they're a way of understanding ourselves, our history, and our possibilities. For those of us who grew up watching his films, Spielberg's work is woven into our memories. We remember where we were when we first saw E.T., reach out his glowing finger when the T-Rex roared in Jurassic Park, when we watched Schindler's List and understood the Holocaust in a new way. His films became part of our shared cultural language. But beyond entertainment, Spielberg has used his success to make the world better. Through the Shoah Foundation, he's preserved the testimonies of Holocaust survivors. Through his films about war, slavery, and injustice, he's educated millions about history. Through his stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, he's inspired countless people to be braver, kinder, and more hopeful. As he moves through his 70s, Spielberg shows no signs of slowing down. He continues to develop new projects, mentor young filmmakers, and push the boundaries of what cinema can do. His curiosity remains boundless, his enthusiasm infectious, his belief in the power of storytelling unshaken. Steven Spielberg's life teaches us valuable lessons. It shows us that talent matters, but so does persistence. He was rejected by film schools, but didn't let that stop him. He snuck onto studio lots because he believed in himself even when others didn't. When his mechanical shark didn't work, he improvised and created something better. When he was dismissed as just a maker of popcorn movies, he made Schindler's List and proved he could tackle the most serious subjects with depth and artistry. His career reminds us that success isn't about choosing between art and entertainment. The best films can be both thrilling and meaningful, popular and profound. A movie about a boy and an alien can make us cry and teach us about empathy. A film about dinosaurs can thrill us while making us think about scientific responsibility. A war movie can honor sacrifice while showing war's true horror. Spielberg also shows us the importance of growth. He didn't rest on his early successes or keep making the same film over and over. He challenged himself with new genres, new subjects, new techniques. In his 70s, he made his first musical. That willingness to remain a student, to keep learning and experimenting, is what keeps his work fresh and vital. Perhaps most importantly, Spielberg's life and work remind us of the power of hope. In a world that often feels dark and cynical, his films insist that wonder still exists, that people can be heroic, that love and connection matter more than anything. This isn't naive optimism. His films about the Holocaust and war show he understands evil and suffering. But even in those dark stories, he finds moments of light: Schindler's transformation, soldiers risking everything to save one man, a lawyer insisting on principle even when it costs him. As we look back on Steven Spielberg's remarkable journey from that lonely boy with a camera to the most successful director in history, we see a life devoted to storytelling in its purest form. He's shown us that stories matter, that they shape how we see ourselves and each other, that they can preserve memory, inspire change, and bring people together across all boundaries. His legacy isn't just the films themselves, though they'll endure for generations. It's what those films have done, the children they've inspired to become filmmakers, scientists, or simply dreamers. The understanding they've created about different people in different times, the hope they've kindled that the world can be better than it is. In an industry often driven by cynicism and market calculations, Spielberg has maintained a genuine love for cinema and respect for audiences. He's never talked down to viewers or assumed they want only empty spectacle. He's trusted that audiences, if given something real and meaningful, will respond. And they have, in numbers unprecedented in film history. Steven Spielberg once said, "I dream for a living." For over 5 decades, he's shared those dreams with us. And in doing so, he's enriched our lives immeasurably. His films have become part of our collective memory, moments of magic we return to again and again. They remind us of who we are at our best: curious, compassionate, brave, and always capable of wonder. That's a gift beyond measure, and one we should treasure.